This is an analysis of the immortal life of Henrietta Lacks by Rebecca Skloot. Here's a really quick summary of the book so you aren't completely lost during the video.
Henrietta Lacks was a poor African-American woman born in 1920. She was diagnosed with cervical cancer soon after her fifth child was born. While getting treated for cancer, her doctor, Howard Jones, took a piece of her tumor without her knowledge and handed it over to George Guy, a cancer researcher. Guy noticed that the cells were dividing above normal speed and that they lived as long as they had nutrients. He gave the cells, that he named HeLa, to anyone who wanted them. Meanwhile, Henrietta's family had no idea any of this was happening until the 1970s. They never received any money for her cells. Since they were first taken in 1951, HeLa cells helped develop drugs for treating herpes, leukemia, influenza, hemophilia, and Parkinson's disease. They have also been used to study lactose digestion, sexually transmitted diseases, appendicitis, human longevity, mosquito mating, gene mapping, and the negative cellular effects of working in the sewers. They helped cancer research and allowed Jonas Salk to test his polio vaccine. Thanks to HeLa cells, polio was eradicated in the US in 1955.
Rebecca Skloot first heard about Henrietta Lacks in a biology course. Her class was learning about mitosis and how cancer disrupts the cycle, and that's when her teacher wrote Henrietta Lacks on the board. He talked about how her cells transformed medicine, how they lived longer outside her body than in it, and how every cell culture lab has her cells. Rebecca soon became interested in HeLa cells, but when she tried to research Henrietta, there wasn't any consistent information about her. Some claimed her name was Helen Lane, which obviously wasn't true, and some sources said she died from breast cancer when others said it was ovarian. As she studied writing in college, Rebecca became focused on the idea of writing a biography about Henrietta. She wanted to tell both Henrietta's story and her cell's story. Her purpose of writing the book is to educate the world about Henrietta Lacks. In the book, Rebecca Skloot doesn't leave any information out. She tells the reader everything from what Henrietta's favorite nail polish was to how she discovered her tumor. She spent 10 years writing a book about her and traveling everywhere she could with Henrietta's daughter, Deborah, to try to get information about Henrietta. The author does try to capture what Henrietta thought and helps the readers understand all of Henrietta's motives. Since Henrietta died when her daughter Deborah was just over a year old, Rebecca explains everything Henrietta wanted to do by showing her wants and desires. The theme of this biography is ethics and race in medicine. The thesis that Rebecca Skloot is trying to prove is that cells or any other type of organ or tissue should not be taken from a person without their consent or their family's consent. While Henrietta's race did impact what hospital she chose, Rebecca believes there isn't any way of knowing if her treatment would have differed if she was white. Rebecca uses description to enforce her thesis by describing other cases, involving HeLa cells, of patients who didn't consent to what the doctors were doing to them. She uses imagery to try to make the readers feel what the patients were feeling. When discussing a case where a virologist injected cancer patients with HeLa cells, she wrote, "He told them he was testing their immune systems. He said nothing about injecting them with someone else's malignant cells." Within hours, the patient's forearms grew red and swollen. 5 to 10 days later, hard nodules began growing at the injection sites. Rebecca uses exposition to help the readers understand how the time period of the book affected Henrietta. Since she was a woman of color and it was the 1950s, she had to go to a hospital that accepted her. An excerpt from the book states, "David drove Henrietta nearly 20 miles to get there, not because they preferred it, but because it was the only major hospital for miles that treated black patients." This was the era of Jim Crow. When black people showed up at white-only hospitals, the staff was likely to send them away, even if it meant they might die in the parking lot. Even Hopkins, which did treat black patients, segregated them in colored wards and had colored-only fountains. This exposition helps Skloot emphasize her thesis on race. Henrietta had to go to a hospital that accepted her as a patient, even if it was far away. Rebecca has a background in science, making her a well-qualified author of this book. Her biography has an extensive history about Henrietta that no other article or book can match. If you wanted to know more about Henrietta Lacks, this is what you should read. Rebecca Skloot wrote many scientific articles about Henrietta, but this is her only book about her. Rebecca's other book, called The Best American Science Writing, is a yearly anthology of popular scientific articles published in the US. If you are someone who has never even heard of HeLa cells before, The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks has important new information about Henrietta's life from front to back. But as someone who is familiar with HeLa cells, there was information about Henrietta that I had either forgotten or just never knew before. Some of those facts include that she was born Loretta Pleasant, she married her first cousin David Lacks, she loved red nail polish, that her cells contaminated other cell cultures, and that she wanted more children towards the end of her treatments, but doctors didn't tell her that her treatments made her infertile. The book explains biological things in a way that everyone can understand, which allows all readers to become interested in Henrietta's story. Readers may at first doubt the book's importance, but once they realize that Henrietta's cells affect everyone, including themselves, they change their minds. The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks shines light on issues relating to patient consent. While in the 50s taking cells from patients was common practice, today we would consider it to be completely unethical. Now I agree with Rebecca and I believe that patients should be asked before doctors take their cells. However, saying that makes me think about Henrietta. If given the choice, there is no way that she would willingly give up her cells to science. And had that happen, we would still be trying to figure out how many chromosomes a cell has. So, in a way, there are some benefits that come out of stealing other people's cells without their permission. In the book, Rebecca states that doctors believe that Henrietta would have been treated the same if she was white. However, Rebecca believes that there is no way of telling if she would have been treated the same if she was white, and I agree. We don't know if they would have still taken her cells or if she would have been given better treatment. Although all of this took place in the past, Henrietta Lacks's cells continue to live on, and so does her story.